For centuries, this plant grew where wheat struggled. Thin soil, limited water, extreme heat. It produced a complete protein on land many crops still avoid. Over time, as farming priorities shifted, it quietly faded from fields, not from failure, but from changing definitions of what a staple should be. Amaranth is not a modern discovery or an experimental crop. It is an ancient plant cultivated specifically for difficult land. It matures quickly, tolerates heat and drought, and produces grain with a complete protein profile. Yet despite these traits, it occupies a marginal place in today's food system. Understanding why requires looking beyond yield alone to how farming priorities gradually narrowed over time. Amaranth is not a true cereal like wheat or rice. Botanically, it is a pseudo-cereal, a broadleaf plant whose seeds function as grain. This distinction matters because it explains much of its resilience. Unlike grasses, amaranth develops a deeper taproot system and broader leaves, allowing it to tolerate heat, irregular rainfall, and poor soil conditions. Both the seeds and the leaves are edible. The grain is naturally gluten-free and contains a complete protein profile, including lysine, an amino acid largely absent in wheat. This makes amaranth nutritionally distinct among staple crops, not as a supplement, but as a primary food source. Its cultivation history spans thousands of years. In Lost Crops of the Incas, the National Research Council documents amaranth as a foundational crop in pre-Columbian agriculture, valued not for maximum yield under ideal conditions, but for reliability under difficult ones. It was selected for environments where farming margins were thin and failure carried serious consequences. From a biological standpoint, amaranth was never fragile. Its design favors survival, adaptability, and nutritional completeness, traits that defined its role long before modern agricultural categories existed. Marginal land is not defined by distance or neglect. It is land limited by shallow soil, low fertility, irregular rainfall, or sustained heat, conditions under which wheat yields decline rapidly. Amaranth performs differently because it was never selected for ideal fields. It was selected for persistence. Amaranth tolerates drought by reducing leaf area and maintaining growth under water stress. Its root system accesses moisture beyond the reach of shallow-rooted cereals, while its short growing cycle reduces exposure to prolonged dry periods. In degraded or low-input soils, it continues to produce seed where wheat often fails to establish. In underutilized and underexploited horticultural crops, researchers document amaranth's ability to maintain stable yields across a wide range of environmental conditions, including saline soils and high temperatures. Yield consistency, rather than peak output, is its defining trait. This distinction matters. Marginal land makes up a growing share of cultivated areas worldwide. On such land, reliability outweighs maximum productivity. Amaranth does not outperform wheat in controlled conditions. It outperforms it where conditions are uncertain, which is where farming increasingly takes place. Wheat did not replace amaranth because it was universally superior. It became dominant because it aligned more closely with emerging farming priorities. Wheat grows uniformly, ripens predictably, and can be harvested, milled, and stored at scale with minimal variation. These traits made it easier to standardize across regions and seasons. As food systems expanded, consistency became as important as yield. Wheat fit milling infrastructure, baking traditions, and long-distance transport. Its grain size, husk structure, and moisture content allowed for efficient processing and stable storage. Amaranth, by contrast, produced smaller seeds and varied more across environments, making large-scale handling more complex. Over time, agricultural decisions favored crops that reduced uncertainty in processing and trade. Fields became larger, supply chains longer, and expectations narrower. Wheat adapted well to these conditions. Amaranth remained localized, flexible, and diverse, qualities valuable in small systems, but less compatible with uniform ones. This shift was gradual. There was no single replacement event, and no immediate decline in amaranth's usefulness. Instead, farming systems optimized around predictability. Crops that fit those systems expanded. Others reseeded, not because they failed agronomically, but because they did not simplify the system. Protein quality is not measured by quantity alone. It is defined by amino acid balance. Wheat protein is limited by low lysine content, which requires dietary compensation through other foods. Amaranth differs because its seed protein contains all essential amino acids in proportions closer to human requirements. This distinction is structural, not promotional. Amaranth protein composition developed without selective breeding for baking or processing traits. It remained nutritionally intact because it was consumed whole rather than refined. As a result, its protein quality remained relevant in low-diversity diets where supplementation was not an option. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, amaranth protein shows a higher biological value than most cereals, particularly in lysine concentration. This made it suitable as a primary protein source rather than a secondary grain. Yet protein quality alone did not determine adoption. Nutritional completeness does not guarantee scale, visibility, or commercial integration. As food systems expanded, protein gaps were addressed through diversification, fortification, and trade. The role of a single nutritionally complete staple became less central. Amaranth did not lose its value. The system simply stopped depending on it. Amaranth did not disappear everywhere. It remained present in farming systems where flexibility mattered more than scale. In parts of Central and South America, Africa, and South Asia, it continued to be grown as both a grain and a leafy vegetable, often within mixed or subsistence farms. These systems valued adaptability. Amaranth fit into short growing windows, tolerated irregular care, and provided multiple harvests from the same plant. Its leaves supplied immediate food, while its seeds offered storage for later use. This dual role made it useful in environments where land, labor, and inputs were limited. Cultivation knowledge was preserved through tradition rather than institutions. Seeds were saved locally. Planting schedules adjusted to rainfall rather than calendars. In these contexts, uniformity was unnecessary. Variation was expected. Amaranth survived because it remained useful at small scales. It did not require specialized machinery, refined processing, or long supply chains. Its persistence was quiet and decentralized, maintained by communities that relied on resilience rather than optimization. Where farming remained adaptive, amaranth remained relevant. When amaranth became less common in mainstream farming, the loss was not immediate or visible. Fields did not fail overnight. Diets did not collapse. The change was gradual, expressed through narrowing options rather than shortages. One loss was functional diversity. Amaranth offered both grain and leafy greens from a single plant, providing flexibility across seasons. As fewer crops filled this role, food systems became more specialized, relying on separate plants for separate functions. This increased dependence on coordinated planting, storage, and trade. Another loss was adaptability. Crops like amaranth absorbed uncertainty. They performed reasonably well across a wide range of conditions, rather than exceptionally well in controlled ones. As these crops reseeded, marginal land became harder to use productively, and farming systems grew less tolerant of variability. Finally, there was a nutritional shift. Diets leaned more heavily on refined staples, with protein quality addressed indirectly through diversification and processing. Amaranth had provided completeness by default. Its absence did not create deficiency, but it reduced resilience. What faded was not a crop alone, but a way of buffering food systems against instability. Amaranth is rarely cultivated today, not because it performs poorly, but because it sits outside dominant agricultural pathways. Modern farming favors crops with established seed systems, standardized varieties, and predictable markets. Amaranth lacks this institutional momentum. Its cultivation remains fragmented, with limited commercial breeding and inconsistent supply chains. The crop also resists uniformity. Amaranth varieties differ widely in height, seed color, and maturation time. This biological diversity supports resilience, but complicates mechanized harvesting and large-scale processing. As a result, it is less attractive to systems built around efficiency and repeatability. In Forgotten Foods, Rediscovering the Hidden Treasures of the World's Traditional Cuisine, the authors note that many nutritionally valuable crops decline not because of inferiority, but because they fail to integrate into modern distribution and consumer habits. Amaranth fits this pattern. It requires cultural familiarity, local processing knowledge, and culinary context. Without strong demand, investment remains low. Without investment, visibility stays limited. Amaranth persists at the margins, not due to constraint, but due to alignment. It remains available, viable, and biologically capable, just rarely selected. Amaranth is not a superfood waiting to be rediscovered. It is a system solution that remained useful even as conditions became less predictable. Its value challenges how efficiency is defined, favoring uniformity and scale over flexibility and resilience. As food systems face increasing stress, the question is not which crop produces the most, but which one endures. If this story changed how you think about food, follow the channel and reconsider what qualifies as real food in the future.